The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Riverside University's main cafeteria as Alex quietly made his way to his usual corner table. He carried a worn black backpack that had seen better days and clutched a simple brown bag containing his lunch. The cafeteria buzzed with the typical morning energy of college, students grabbing coffee and chatting about weekend plans. Alex preferred this spot because it gave him a clear view of the courtyard while keeping him away from the main traffic of students. He pulled out his engineering textbooks, carefully arranging them on the small round table. His laptop, though functional, was clearly a few years old with a small crack running along one corner of the screen. He didn't mind, though. It worked perfectly fine for his coursework. As he unwrapped his homemade sandwich, Alex noticed the usual group of well-dressed students settling into the center area of the cafeteria. Tyler Morrison led the pack, his designer clothes and confident swagger making it clear he came from money. The group always chose the prime seating area, their voices carrying across the room as they discussed their latest purchases and weekend trips to expensive resorts. Alex opened his thermodynamics textbook and took a bite of his sandwich. He had a major exam coming up next week, and despite already having the highest grades in his class, he never took his studies lightly. The numbers and equations seemed to dance across the page as he worked through complex problems that would challenge most graduate students. "Look at that guy over there." Tyler's voice cut through the ambient noise of the cafeteria. Alex glanced up briefly but quickly returned to his studies. He had learned long ago that drawing attention to himself rarely ended well. "Which one?" asked Connor, Tyler's closest friend, who always seemed to echo whatever Tyler said. "Corner table. Same spot every day. Look at that ancient laptop," Tyler said with a smirk. "I bet that thing takes 10 minutes just to start up." The group erupted in quiet laughter, though Alex pretended not to hear. He had dealt with people like this before. In his experience, ignoring them usually made them lose interest and move on to someone else. But Tyler wasn't the type to lose interest easily. "And check out that backpack," Tyler continued, his voice getting slightly louder. "I think I had one just like that in middle school. My mom donated it to charity years ago." Alex's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his eyes focused on his textbook. He was working through a particularly challenging problem about heat transfer coefficients, and he genuinely found the work more interesting than whatever game Tyler was playing. "Maybe we should go introduce ourselves," suggested Bryce, another member of Tyler's group. "Be friendly to the scholarship kids, you know? Show some school spirit." "Oh, I'm sure he'd love that," Tyler replied, standing up from his chair. "Come on, let's go say hello." Alex sensed movement in his peripheral vision but continued working on his calculations. He had almost solved the problem when a shadow fell across his table. "Hey there," Tyler said in an overly friendly tone that didn't match the mocking look in his eyes. "I don't think we've officially met. I'm Tyler." Alex looked up slowly, meeting Tyler's gaze with calm, steady eyes. "Alex," he replied simply, then returned to his textbook. "Alex," Tyler repeated as if testing how the name sounded. "That's a nice watch you've got there, Alex. Where'd you get it, Target?" The watch in question was actually a vintage Patek Philippe that Alex's grandfather had given him for his 18th birthday. It was worth more than most people's cars, but Alex had never felt the need to broadcast that fact. To most observers, it looked like a simple silver watch with a clean, understated design. "It was a gift," Alex said without looking up. "A gift," Tyler repeated, glancing back at his friends with raised eyebrows. "That's sweet. Family heirloom or something?" Alex didn't respond. He had learned that engaging with people like Tyler only encouraged them. Instead, he focused on finishing his problem set, his pencil moving steadily across the paper. "You know, Alex, I was just thinking," Tyler continued, pulling out an empty chair and sitting down uninvited. "You're here every morning, same time, same spot. Always alone. That must get pretty lonely." "I prefer to study in quiet," Alex replied calmly. "Study, right?" Tyler nodded mockingly. "What's your major?" "Let me guess. Something practical? Maybe accounting? Or are you one of those computer science guys who thinks he's going to create the next big app?" "Engineering," Alex said simply. "Engineering," Tyler exclaimed, loud enough that several nearby tables turned to look. "Well, that explains all the serious studying. Must be tough trying to keep up with all the math and science. I bet your calculator gets more use than most people's phones." Connor and Bryce snickered from where they stood behind Tyler's chair. Alex closed his textbook slowly and began packing his things. "Leaving so soon?" Tyler asked with mock disappointment. We were just getting to know each other. Alex stood up, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. He was about to leave when Tyler suddenly reached out and knocked over Alex's coffee cup. The hot liquid splashed across the table, immediately soaking into Alex's notebook and threatening to reach his laptop. "Oh man, I'm so sorry," Tyler said with obvious fake concern. "How clumsy of me." Alex quickly grabbed his laptop, checking it for damage while trying to save what he could of his notes. 3 weeks of carefully organized engineering calculations were now coffee-stained and partially illegible. "Here, let me help you with that," Tyler offered, grabbing a handful of napkins but making no real effort to help clean up the mess. "Don't," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of steel that made Tyler pause for just a moment. "Hey, accidents happen," Tyler shrugged. "Maybe next time don't sit so close to the edge of the table. Just a suggestion." Alex carefully placed his damp notebook in his backpack along with his laptop and textbooks. The entire cafeteria seemed to be watching now, though most students looked away when Alex glanced in their direction. "See you around, Alex," Tyler called out as Alex walked toward the exit. "Same time tomorrow?" Alex didn't respond. He walked out of the cafeteria with the same calm dignity he had maintained throughout the encounter. Behind him, Tyler's group was already laughing about something else, having apparently moved on from their morning entertainment. As Alex stepped outside into the crisp morning air, he pulled out his phone to check for any messages from his study group. The phone, like everything else he carried, was a few generations old but perfectly functional. He had specifically chosen not to bring his newer devices to campus, preferring to blend in rather than stand out. Walking across the courtyard toward his first class, Alex reflected on the encounter. He had dealt with people like Tyler his entire life in various forms and settings. Some were motivated by insecurity, others by genuine malice, but they all shared the same fundamental mistake. They judged people based on surface appearances and assumed that what they saw was the whole story. Alex adjusted his backpack straps and quickened his pace slightly. He had a physics lab in 10 minutes, and despite the morning's interruption, he was looking forward to the work ahead. His professor had mentioned they would be working on advanced quantum mechanics problems today, something that would require his full attention and considerable skill. As he disappeared into the physics building, Alex was already putting the cafeteria incident behind him. He had more important things to focus on than Tyler Morrison's need for entertainment. After all, his education was the whole point of being here, and he wasn't about to let anything distract him from that goal. The next few weeks brought a noticeable shift in Alex's daily routine at Riverside University. What had started as an isolated incident in the cafeteria had somehow evolved into a regular pattern of encounters with Tyler and his group. It seemed like everywhere Alex went on campus, they were there too, ready with comments and observations about his appearance, his belongings, or his study habits. Alex tried switching up his schedule, arriving at the library at different times and choosing various study spots around campus, but Tyler's group seemed to have an uncanny ability to find him. It was as if they had made bothering Alex their new hobby. "There's our engineering genius," Tyler would announce whenever he spotted Alex in the student union or walking between classes. "Still carrying that vintage backpack, I see. Very retro." The comments always came with that same mocking tone, loud enough for other students to hear but delivered with a smile that made it difficult for anyone to call it outright harassment. Tyler had perfected the art of plausible deniability. Alex's roommate Kevin started noticing the changes in Alex's behavior. "You've been coming back to the room later every night," Kevin observed one evening as Alex quietly entered their shared dorm room. "Everything okay?" "Just busy with coursework," Alex replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. He had been staying later in the engineering lab, partly because he genuinely enjoyed the work, but also because it was one of the few places on campus where Tyler's group never seemed to venture. "You sure? Because I saw something on Instagram today that looked like—" Kevin trailed off, pulling out his phone. "Here, look at this." Alex reluctantly looked at Kevin's screen. Someone had posted a photo of Alex walking across the quad, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his head down, focused on his phone. The caption read, "When you're trying to look important but your whole outfit costs less than my coffee." The post had dozens of likes and several laughing emoji reactions. Who posted this? Alex asked, though he already suspected the answer. Connor Phillips, one of Tyler Morrison's crew. "Alex, this isn't cool. You should report this to Student Affairs." Alex handed the phone back to Kevin. It's just a photo, not really worth making a big deal about. But Kevin could see that Alex was bothered by it even though he was trying to hide it. Dude, they're basically cyberbullying you. That's not something you just ignore. I can handle it, Alex said firmly, settling down at his desk to work on his engineering assignments. Kevin wanted to push the issue further, but something in Alex's tone suggested the conversation was over. Still, he made a mental note to keep an eye on the situation. The Instagram post was just the beginning. Over the following days, more photos appeared on various social media accounts. Alex eating alone in the cafeteria, Alex riding his older mountain bike across campus, Alex studying in the library with his stack of worn textbooks. Each photo came with increasingly creative captions mocking his budget lifestyle and try-hard academic persona. The worst part wasn't the photos themselves, but the way other students began to look at him. Alex noticed the stares and whispered conversations when he walked by groups of people. Some students seemed sympathetic, but most appeared to find the whole situation amusing. A few even approached him with exaggerated concern, asking if he needed help finding resources for students with financial difficulties. I heard the engineering department has emergency funds for students who can't afford basic supplies. One well-meaning sophomore told him after a particularly difficult day. You might want to look into that. Alex thanked her politely but felt the familiar knot forming in his stomach. The narrative that Tyler had created about him was spreading, and it was starting to affect how everyone on campus perceived him. Things escalated further when Alex discovered that someone had been spreading rumors about his academic record. Students in his engineering classes began questioning whether his high grades were legitimate. I heard he pays other students to do his homework. Alex overheard one classmate saying to another, "That's how he's maintaining that GPA." "Makes sense," the other replied. "Have you seen how he dresses? He's obviously trying to compensate for something." Professor Williams, Alex's thermodynamics instructor, noticed the change in classroom dynamics during one particularly uncomfortable study session. "Alex, could you stay after class for a moment?" she asked as students filed out. "Is everything all right?" Alex asked, though he suspected what was coming. "I've been hearing some concerning rumors about academic integrity," Professor Williams said carefully. "I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your work. Your understanding of the material is clearly genuine, and your problem-solving approach is uniquely yours. But I'm wondering if there's something going on that you'd like to discuss." Alex appreciated his professor's support, but he wasn't ready to explain the full situation. "I'm fine, Professor Williams. Just focused on my studies." She studied his face for a moment. "Alex, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've seen what harassment can do to brilliant students. If someone is making your academic life difficult, there are resources available." "I can handle it," Alex replied, the same phrase he had been using with Kevin. Professor Williams nodded slowly. "Well, my office door is always open if you change your mind." That afternoon, Alex discovered the latest escalation in Tyler's campaign. His bicycle, which he had locked in the usual spot near the engineering building, had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "fake" across the frame in bright red letters. They had also deflated both tires and somehow managed to tangle the chain so badly that it would need professional repair. Alex stood staring at his bike for several minutes, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment that he had never experienced before. This wasn't just mockery anymore. This was destruction of his property, and it had happened in broad daylight on a busy part of campus. "That's messed up," said a voice behind him. Alex turned to see Diana, a girl from his advanced calculus class. "Who would do something like this?" "I have no idea," Alex lied, though they both probably suspected the truth. "You should definitely report this to campus security," Diana said, pulling out her phone. "This is vandalism. They have cameras all over this area." Alex looked around and noticed the security cameras positioned near the bike racks. For a moment, he considered following Diana's advice. But then he thought about the attention it would bring, the questions he would have to answer, and the possibility that involving authorities might make things worse. "I'll think about it," he told Diana, though he had already decided against it. That evening, Alex called a local bike shop to arrange for repairs. The conversation with the mechanic was frustrating. "Yeah, we can fix it," the mechanic said after Alex described the damage. "But honestly, Considering the age and condition of the bike, you might want to think about just getting a new one. The repair costs are going to be pretty significant. Alex arranged to bring the bike in anyway. He had grown attached to it over the years, and he wasn't ready to let Tyler's vandalism force him into major expenses. Kevin was waiting when Alex returned to their dorm room that evening. "I heard about your bike," he said immediately. "This has gone way too far. How did you hear about it?" "Diana posted about it. She's trying to get people to keep an eye out for whoever did it." Kevin showed Alex his phone screen. "Alex, you have to report this. This isn't just harassment anymore. This is property damage." Alex sat down heavily on his bed. The day had been exhausting, and he was tired of having the same conversation over and over again. "I know you think you can handle this on your own," Kevin continued, "but these guys aren't going to stop. If anything, they're getting worse. What happens when they decide to target your laptop next? Or your textbooks?" The thought had already occurred to Alex, and it worried him more than he wanted to admit. His laptop contained months of important coursework, and losing it would set him back significantly. "Look," Kevin said, sitting down on his own bed and facing Alex directly. "I don't know what your deal is. Maybe you're worried about money, or maybe there's something else going on. But whatever the reason, you're not fighting back. These guys are taking advantage of it." Alex looked at his roommate for a long moment. Kevin had been nothing but supportive since the harassment began, and Alex felt guilty for not being more open with him. "It's complicated," Alex said finally. "Everything's complicated," Kevin replied, "but that doesn't mean you have to deal with it alone." That night, Alex lay awake thinking about Kevin's words. His roommate was right about one thing. Tyler and his group weren't showing any signs of stopping. If anything, they seemed energized by Alex's lack of response, and Alex was getting tired of constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering when and where the next incident would occur. But reporting the harassment would bring attention, and attention was the last thing Alex wanted. He had come to Riverside University with specific goals, and those goals didn't include becoming the center of campus drama or having to explain his family's background to university administrators. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Alex made a decision. He would continue to handle the situation his own way, but he would also be more careful about protecting himself and his property. He couldn't control Tyler's behavior, but he could control his own response to it. What Alex didn't know was that events were already in motion that would soon make his careful approach irrelevant. In just a few weeks, his father would be arriving on campus for the annual donor gala, and the carefully maintained separation between Alex's university life and his family background was about to disappear completely. 3 weeks before the annual Riverside University donor gala, Alex received a text message that made him smile for the first time in days. "Looking forward to seeing you soon. Hope you're ready for our traditional dinner at Antonio's," the message read. It was from his father, Robert Chen, confirming their plans for his upcoming visit to campus. Alex had been looking forward to this visit for months. Every year, his father attended the university's biggest fundraising event, and they always made time for a quiet dinner together, away from all the formal presentations and networking conversations. It was one of the few times Alex felt he could truly relax and just be himself. Robert Chen had built his technology company, Chen Innovations, from nothing more than a small software development shop in his garage. Over the past 20 years, he had grown it into one of the most successful tech firms on the West Coast, specializing in artificial intelligence and data analytics solutions. Fortune 500 companies relied on Chen Innovations for their most complex technological challenges. Despite his success, Robert had always been careful to keep his family life private. He believed strongly that his children should earn their own way in the world, without the advantages or disadvantages that came with being known as the Chen kids. Alex had grown up understanding this philosophy and had never questioned it. When Alex chose to attend Riverside University, Robert had been pleased with the decision. The engineering program was excellent, and Robert had been supporting the university's research initiatives for years through both financial donations and collaborative projects. What Alex didn't fully realize was just how significant his father's relationship with the university had become. As the gala approached, Alex found himself both excited and nervous about his father's visit. The harassment from Tyler's group had continued, though it had settled into a more predictable pattern. They still made comments about his appearance and belongings, and occasionally someone would post another mocking photo on social media, but there hadn't been any more incidents like the bike vandalism. Alex had developed a routine for dealing with it. He varied his schedule as much as possible, avoided certain areas of campus during peak social hours, and had even started eating lunch in the engineering lab instead of the cafeteria. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Kevin, his roommate, had stopped pushing Alex to report the harassment, though he still clearly disagreed with Alex's approach. "Your call," he had said after their last conversation about it, "but I still think you're making this harder on yourself than it needs to be." The week of the gala, Alex received another text from his father. "Arrived early. Meetings all day tomorrow, but free for lunch if you're available." Alex immediately responded with enthusiasm. They arranged to meet at a small cafe off campus, away from the university crowds. When Alex arrived at the cafe, he found his father already seated at a corner table, reading through what appeared to be a stack of financial reports. Robert Chen was a tall, soft-spoken man in his early 50s, with graying hair and the kind of thoughtful expression that came from years of solving complex problems. "Dad," Alex said, approaching the table with a genuine smile. Robert stood up and embraced his son warmly. "You look good," he said, though Alex caught a hint of concern in his father's eyes. "How's the semester going?" "Really well," Alex replied, settling into his chair. "I'm working on this fascinating project in Professor Williams' class about heat transfer optimization. The applications for renewable energy systems are incredible." Robert's face lit up with interest. This was exactly the kind of conversation he had hoped for. "Tell me more about that. Are you looking at solar applications or something broader?" For the next hour, they discussed Alex's coursework, his research projects, and his plans for the summer. Robert was impressed by his son's knowledge and passion for engineering, but he also noticed something that concerned him. Alex seemed more reserved than usual, and there was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there during previous visits. "Everything else going well?" Robert asked as they finished their lunch. "Making friends? Enjoying the campus social life?" Alex hesitated for just a moment before answering. "It's fine. I'm pretty focused on academics right now." Robert studied his son's face. He had learned over the years to read between the lines when it came to his children. "Alex, is there something you want to talk about?" "Not really," Alex replied, perhaps a bit too quickly. "Just the usual college stuff. Nothing important." Robert decided not to push the issue, but he made a mental note to keep an eye on things during his stay on campus. His parental instincts were telling him that something wasn't quite right, even though Alex seemed determined not to discuss it. "Well," Robert said, changing the subject, "I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's gala. It should be interesting. The university has some exciting new research initiatives they want to discuss." Alex nodded, though he felt a small knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. The gala was always a big event on campus, and he worried about the possibility of running into Tyler's group while his father was around. The last thing he wanted was for his family situation to become part of Tyler's entertainment. "Will you be at the gala?" Robert asked. "I wasn't planning on it," Alex replied. "It's usually pretty formal, and I figured you'd be busy with all the donor meetings anyway." Robert looked surprised. "Alex, you're always welcome at these events. In fact, I'd love to have you there. It might be interesting for you to see some of the research projects the university is working on." Alex felt torn. Part of him wanted to spend the evening with his father, but another part of him worried about the complications it might create. "I'll think about it," he said finally. That evening, Alex walked his father back to the campus guest house where he was staying. The building was one of the university's most prestigious accommodations, typically reserved for major donors and distinguished visitors. Alex had never been inside before, though he had walked past it countless times. "This is nice," Alex commented as they entered the elegantly appointed lobby. "The university takes good care of its guests," Robert replied. "Alex, are you sure you don't want to join me for dinner tonight? I'm meeting with Dean Patterson and a few other faculty members. It's informal and I think you'd enjoy the conversation." Alex was tempted, but he ultimately declined. "I have a big problem set due tomorrow." "Rain check?" Robert nodded, though Alex could tell he was disappointed. "Of course. Study comes first." As Alex walked back to his dorm, he reflected on the lunch with his father. It had been wonderful to catch up and share his enthusiasm for his coursework, but he felt guilty about not being completely open about the harassment situation. He told himself that it wasn't serious enough to worry his father about, and that it would probably resolve itself eventually. Meanwhile, across campus, Tyler Morrison was having a very different kind of conversation with his own father, who had also arrived early for the gala. David Morrison was a successful lawyer who had built a respectable practice specializing in corporate law. While not in the same financial league as the university's top donors, he was well connected and influential in local business circles. "So tell me about this donor gala," David Morrison said as he and Tyler walked across the campus quad. "I'm looking forward to meeting some of the major supporters. It could be good for business." "It's a pretty big deal," Tyler replied. "All the wealthy alumni come back, plus local business leaders. Dad, you should definitely try to meet Robert Chen if he's there. That guy's company is worth billions." David Morrison's ears perked up. "Chen Innovations? I've been trying to get a meeting with their legal team for months. If he's going to be there, that could be a real opportunity." "Yeah, I've heard he donates huge amounts to the university," Tyler said. "Probably trying to buy his way into the social elite, you know? New money always does that." David Morrison frowned slightly at his son's comment. "Tyler, Robert Chen built his company from nothing. That's not buying his way into anything. That's earning it." "Whatever," Tyler shrugged. "Rich is rich." Their conversation was interrupted when Tyler spotted a familiar figure walking across the quad. "Oh, there's that guy I was telling you about," Tyler said, pointing toward Alex. "The scholarship kid who thinks he's hot stuff in engineering." David Morrison looked in the direction Tyler was pointing. He saw a young man walking alone carrying a backpack and apparently focused on his phone. "That's the student you've been having issues with?" "Issues?" Tyler laughed. "Dad, the guy's just entertainment. He takes himself so seriously and he's so obviously out of place here. It's kind of funny, actually." David Morrison studied his son's expression and felt a growing sense of unease. "Tyler, you're not doing anything inappropriate, are you? Because if you're harassing another student..." "Relax, Dad, it's just harmless fun. The guy needs to learn not to take himself so seriously." But David Morrison wasn't convinced. He had seen enough workplace harassment cases in his legal practice to recognize the warning signs. And something about his son's attitude troubled him. That night, as both fathers prepared for the next day's gala, neither of them fully understood the collision course that was being set in motion. Robert Chen was looking forward to a proud moment sharing the university environment with his son, while David Morrison was hoping to expand his business network and keep an eye on his son's behavior. Alex, meanwhile, was still trying to decide whether to attend the gala at all. He had no way of knowing that this decision would ultimately become irrelevant, and that the carefully maintained separation between his university life and his family background was about to come to an abrupt end. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything, not just for Alex and Tyler, but for everyone who had been watching their ongoing conflict from the sidelines. Tomorrow night's gala would prove to be far more dramatic than anyone had anticipated. The evening of the Riverside University Donor Gala arrived with perfect autumn weather. The university's grand ballroom had been transformed into an elegant venue, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over round tables draped in the school's colors. Faculty members in formal attire mingled with wealthy alumni, local business leaders, and major donors who had traveled from across the country for the event. Alex had finally decided to attend, though he remained conflicted about the decision. His father had seemed genuinely disappointed when Alex initially declined, and Alex realized he was being selfish by avoiding the event just because he was worried about Tyler's group. After all, this was his father's night, and Alex wanted to be supportive. He had borrowed a suit from Kevin, who was slightly taller, but close enough in size that the outfit worked reasonably well. Alex felt underdressed compared to the custom-tailored suits and designer dresses surrounding him. But he reminded himself that he was there to spend time with his father, not to impress anyone else. Robert Chen stood near the reception area, deep in conversation with Dean Patterson and several other university officials. He looked completely at ease in the formal environment, his own perfectly fitted suit and confident demeanor marking him as someone accustomed to high-level business gatherings. "The new engineering lab is going to revolutionize how we approach renewable energy research," Dean Patterson was saying. "Your company's contribution to the project has made it possible to recruit some of the top researchers in the field." I'm pleased to support anything that advances clean technology, Robert replied. Education and innovation are the keys to solving our biggest challenges. Across the room, Tyler Morrison arrived with his father, both of them scanning the crowd for networking opportunities. Tyler had dressed in his most expensive suit and was clearly excited about the prospect of rubbing shoulders with the university's wealthiest supporters. Remember what I said about Robert Chen? David Morrison whispered to his son as they collected their name tags at the registration table. If you see him, I'd like an introduction. No problem. Dad, I'll keep an eye out for him. Tyler immediately began working the room, introducing himself to various guests and making small talk about the university's programs. He was in his element at events like this, where his natural charisma and family connections opened doors and created opportunities. It was about 30 minutes into the reception when Tyler spotted Alex standing near the silent auction tables, apparently studying the various items up for bid. Tyler's first reaction was surprise. He hadn't expected to see Alex at such an upscale event. His second reaction was amusement. Connor, check this out, Tyler said to his friend who had also attended with his family. Look who decided to crash the party. Connor followed Tyler's gaze and grinned. No way, what's he doing here? You think he's working the event? Must be, Tyler replied. Probably earning some extra money serving drinks or something. Actually, that's kind of smart. Get a close-up look at how the other half lives. Tyler's confidence grew as he considered the possibilities. Here was Alex clearly out of his element at a formal event, surrounded by wealthy people who represented everything Tyler's group had been mocking him for lacking. It was almost too perfect. I think we should go say hello, Tyler announced. Welcome him to the party. Meanwhile, Alex was genuinely interested in the silent auction items, many of which were related to engineering and technology. There was a private tour of a local aerospace facility, dinner with the Dean of Engineering, and even a vintage slide rule collection that caught his attention. Fascinating stuff, isn't it? Said a voice beside him. Alex turned to see Professor Williams, his thermodynamics instructor, holding a glass of wine and smiling warmly. Professor Williams, I didn't expect to see you here, Alex said, genuinely pleased to encounter a familiar face. These events are always interesting, she replied. It's nice to see where our research funding comes from. And some of the donors have fascinating stories about their own engineering backgrounds. My father's been telling me about some of the university's research initiatives, Alex said. It sounds like there are some really exciting projects in development. Professor Williams looked curious. Your father's familiar with our research programs? Before Alex could answer, Tyler's voice cut through their conversation. Well. If it isn't our favorite engineering student, Tyler said loudly, approaching with Connor in tow. Alex, I have to say I'm impressed. I didn't know they let scholarship students attend events like this. Professor Williams immediately stiffened at Tyler's tone and words. Alex, meanwhile, felt his stomach drop as he realized his worst fears about attending the gala were coming true. Tyler, Alex said quietly, hoping to defuse the situation before it escalated. I mean, this is great, Tyler continued, his voice carrying far enough that other guests were beginning to notice. It's like one of those feel-good stories where the disadvantaged kid gets to see how successful people live. Very inspirational. Tyler, perhaps you should, Professor Williams began. But Tyler was just getting started. Alex, you clean up pretty well, Tyler said, looking him up and down with exaggerated approval. Though I have to ask, did you rent that suit or is it borrowed? Because the fit is a little off, but hey, it's definitely an improvement over your usual look. Alex felt his face burning with embarrassment as more people turned to watch the interaction. This was exactly what he had been afraid of, becoming the center of attention in the worst possible way, with his father somewhere in the same room. I'm just here to support the university, Alex said evenly, trying to end the conversation. Support the university, Tyler repeated with a laugh. That's rich. Alex, no offense, but I'm pretty sure you're here to see how the other half lives, not to provide support. Unless you've got a secret trust fund you haven't told anyone about. The comment drew chuckles from Connor and a few other students who had gathered to watch the spectacle. Alex noticed that several adults were also paying attention now, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. You know what, Alex? Tyler continued, warming to his audience. I've got to give you credit. It takes real confidence to show up at an event like this when you so obviously don't belong. I mean, look around. Everyone here has contributed something significant to this university. What exactly have you contributed besides taking up space in classes that could go to students who can actually afford to be here? The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Alex felt a familiar mixture of anger and frustration building inside him, but he also knew that losing his temper would only make things worse. "That's enough," Professor Williams said firmly, stepping closer to Alex. "Tyler, your behavior is completely inappropriate." "Professor Williams, with all due respect, I'm just making conversation," Tyler replied with fake innocence. "Alex and I are practically friends at this point. Aren't we, Alex?" Alex was about to respond when he heard a voice that made his blood run cold. "Alex, is everything all right over here?" Robert Chen had approached the group, drawn by the commotion and his parental instinct that his son might be in trouble. He looked impeccably professional in his tailored suit, and Alex could see several other guests recognizing him as one of the evening's major donors. Tyler's first reaction was excitement at potentially meeting Robert Chen, whom he had heard his father mention earlier. His second reaction was confusion about why the billionaire tech mogul was asking about Alex. "Mr. Chen," Tyler said quickly, extending his hand with his most charming smile. "I'm Tyler Morrison. My father, David Morrison, is here tonight as well. He's been hoping to meet you." Robert shook Tyler's hand politely, but his attention remained focused on Alex. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" he asked Tyler absently. "We haven't, but I've heard so much about your company," Tyler replied eagerly. "Actually, Alex and I were just discussing—" "Dad," Alex interrupted quietly, the word barely audible but carrying enough weight to change everything. Tyler's sentence died mid-word. The small crowd that had gathered around them went completely silent. Professor Williams' eyes widened in surprise. Connor's mouth actually fell open. "Dad?" Tyler repeated, his voice cracking slightly. Robert Chen's expression shifted from polite confusion to protective concern as he fully grasped the situation. He moved closer to Alex, placing a supportive hand on his son's shoulder. "Is there a problem here?" Robert asked, his tone remaining calm but taking on an unmistakable edge of authority. Tyler's mind was reeling as he tried to process what he had just learned. Alex, the student he had been mocking for weeks, the scholarship kid with the worn backpack and secondhand clothes, was Robert Chen's son, the heir to one of the most successful technology companies on the West Coast. We were just," Tyler stammered, all of his earlier confidence evaporating. "Just what?" Robert asked, his piercing gaze fixed on Tyler. The circle of onlookers had grown larger, and Tyler became acutely aware that dozens of people were watching this exchange, including several university officials and other major donors. His father was nowhere to be seen, probably networking on the other side of the room, completely unaware of the disaster unfolding. "We were just talking," Tyler managed to say, his voice much quieter than before. "Talking," Robert repeated, clearly not believing it. He turned to Alex. "Son, what exactly was the nature of this conversation?" Alex looked up at his father, seeing the concern and growing anger in his eyes. For weeks, Alex had been handling Tyler's harassment on his own, determined not to involve anyone else. But now, with the situation exploding in the most public way possible, he realized that approach was no longer an option. "It's fine, Dad," Alex said quietly. "Just a misunderstanding." But Professor Williams had heard enough to understand what had really been happening. "Mr. Chen," she said carefully, "I think there might be more to this situation than a simple misunderstanding." Robert looked at Professor Williams, then back at Tyler, whose face had gone pale. Around them, the conversations of other guests had stopped entirely as people realized they were witnessing something significant. "Tyler Morrison," Robert said slowly, as if testing the name. "Your father is David Morrison?" "Yes, sir," Tyler replied weakly. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, Tyler, I think it might be time for you to find your father. I suspect he and I are going to want to have a conversation very soon." The implications of Robert's words hit Tyler like a physical blow. His father's law firm had been desperately trying to land Chen Innovations as a client. If Robert Chen decided to share tonight's events with David Morrison, it would be more than just embarrassing, it could be professionally devastating. "Mr. Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Tyler said desperately. "Alex and I were friends. We joke around sometimes, but it's all in good fun. Right, Alex?" Every eye in the immediate area turned to Alex, waiting for his response. He looked at Tyler, seeing genuine fear in the other student's eyes for the first time since their encounters had began. Then he looked at his father, recognizing the barely controlled anger in Robert's expression. Alex realized that this moment would define not just his relationship with Tyler, but how the rest of his time at Riverside University would unfold. The secret he had worked so hard to maintain was out, and there was no going back. "No, Tyler," Alex said quietly but clearly. "We're not friends." The silence that followed Alex's declaration stretched for what felt like an eternity. Tyler stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of shock, panic, and growing realization of what his behavior had cost him. The elegant donor gala continued around them, but their small corner of the ballroom had become the center of everyone's attention. Robert Chen's jaw tightened as he processed his son's words. "Alex," he said quietly, "I think you and I need to have a private conversation. But first, Tyler, I suggest you find your father immediately." "Mr. Chen, please." "I can explain," Tyler began desperately. "No need," Robert replied, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of running a major corporation. "Your actions have explained quite enough." Professor Williams stepped forward, her academic training kicking in. "Mr. Chen, perhaps we should involve Dean Patterson in this conversation. As faculty, I have an obligation to report what I've witnessed." Robert nodded appreciatively. "That would be appropriate, Professor Williams. I teach thermodynamics in the engineering program. Alex is one of my best students." "Thank you, Professor Williams. I'd appreciate your involvement in resolving the situation." Tyler's panic was now clearly visible. Sweat had formed on his forehead despite the cool temperature of the ballroom, and his earlier confidence had completely evaporated. "Look, everyone's making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Alex, tell them. Tell them it was just joking around between friends." Alex looked at Tyler steadily. For weeks he had absorbed every insult, every mocking comment, every social media post designed to humiliate him. He had told himself he was taking the high road by not responding. But now he understood that his silence had only enabled Tyler's behavior to escalate. "Tyler," Alex said calmly, "you spray-painted my bicycle. You've been taking photos of me without permission and posting them online with mocking captions. You've told other students that I'm cheating academically and don't belong at this university. None of that sounds like friendship to me." The crowd around them had grown larger, and Alex could see several university officials making their way through the guests toward their group. Tyler's face went even paler as he realized the full scope of what Alex was revealing. That wasn't..." Tyler stuttered, but his denial sounded weak even to himself. Dean Patterson arrived just as Tyler was attempting to explain himself. The dean was a distinguished woman in her 60s who had been leading the university's engineering program for over a decade. She immediately assessed the situation with the sharp intelligence that had made her one of the most respected educators in her field. "Mr. Chen," she said warmly, extending her hand to Robert, "I hope you're enjoying the gala." "Is there something I can help with here?" "Dean Patterson," Robert replied, shaking her hand. "I'm afraid there's been an incident involving my son and another student. Professor Williams suggested you should be involved." Dean Patterson's expression became serious as she looked around the group. "Of course. Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private." "Actually," Robert said, glancing around at the watching crowd, "I think the situation has already become quite public, but you're right that we should discuss the details privately." Tyler saw his last chance slipping away. "Dean Patterson, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Alex and I have had some minor disagreements, but nothing serious. I think emotions are running high because of the formal setting and everything." Dean Patterson studied Tyler's face with the same analytical approach she applied to complex engineering problems. "Mr. Morrison, isn't it? I remember your application. Your father called several times during the admissions process." The reminder of his father's involvement made Tyler even more nervous. "Yes, ma'am." "Dean Patterson, I really think if we could just sit down and talk about this calmly." "We will definitely be sitting down to talk," Dean Patterson replied. "Professor Williams, would you mind joining us in my office?" "Mr. Chen, I hope you'll participate as well." "Of course," Robert said. "Alex, do you feel comfortable discussing this situation openly?" Alex looked at his father, then at Dean Patterson and Professor Williams. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had allies who would actually listen to him and take action. "Yes, I do," As the group began moving toward the exit, Tyler made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. "Alex, wait," he called out. "Can't we work this out between ourselves? I mean, we're both students here. We should be able to handle this without involving the administration." Alex turned back to face Tyler. "You had weeks to handle this between ourselves. Tyler, you chose not to." The meeting in Dean Patterson's office lasted for over an hour. Alex provided a detailed account of the harassment, including dates, locations, and witnesses. Professor Williams shared her observations about the changes in Alex's behavior and the rumors that had been circulating about his academic integrity. Robert listened quietly, his anger growing with each new detail. Dean Patterson took careful notes throughout the conversation. "Mr. Chen, Alex, why didn't you report this harassment when it began?" she asked. Alex glanced at his father before answering. "I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And Tyler Morrison specifically targeted you based on assumptions about your economic background." Dean Patterson continued. "Yes. He seemed to think I was on financial aid and didn't belong at the university." Robert spoke for the first time during the meeting. "Dean Patterson, I'm obviously concerned about my son's experience, but I'm also troubled by the broader implications. If students feel they can harass their classmates based on perceived economic status, that suggests a cultural problem that goes beyond this individual incident." Dean Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. We take harassment of any kind very seriously, but this type of behavior is particularly troubling because it attacks the fundamental values of our academic community." The next few days brought swift consequences for Tyler and his group. The university's investigation confirmed Alex's account through security camera footage, social media evidence, and interviews with witnesses. Tyler was suspended for the remainder of the semester and required to complete community service and sensitivity training before being eligible to return. Connor and the other students who had participated in posting mocking photos received lesser penalties but were also required to attend workshops on cyberbullying and respectful campus behavior. Canada impact extended beyond the university as well. David Morrison's law firm received a polite but firm letter from Chen Innovations, declining any future business relationships. When David demanded an explanation from his son, the full story came out, leading to one of the most difficult conversations of Tyler's life. "I can't believe you would behave this way," David told his son during a tense family meeting. "We raised you better than this." "Dad, I didn't know who his father was," Tyler protested. "That's exactly the problem," David replied sharply. "It shouldn't matter who his father is. You harassed another student based on assumptions about his background, and that's unacceptable regardless of his family's circumstances." Meanwhile, Alex found himself dealing with an entirely different set of challenges. Word had spread quickly through the campus about his family background, and suddenly everyone wanted to be his friend. Students who had ignored him for months were now eager to be seen with him, and professors who had barely noticed him were suddenly very interested in his research projects. "It's weird, isn't it?" Kevin observed as they watched a group of students obviously trying to get Alex's attention in the cafeteria. "Now that people know about your family, they're acting like you're a completely different person." "I'm exactly the same person I was last week," Alex replied. "That's what makes it weird." Robert had stayed on campus for several extra days to help Alex navigate the aftermath of the revelation. During one of their evening walks around the campus, he shared his perspective on the situation. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself," Robert told his son. "You could have ended Tyler's harassment immediately just by mentioning our family name, but you chose to try to resolve it on your own merits." "I'm not sure that was the right choice," Alex admitted. "Maybe if I had been more open from the beginning, none of this would have escalated so far." "Maybe," Robert agreed. "But you were trying to be judged on your own character and achievements, not on your family's success. That's admirable, even if the execution was imperfect." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Robert continued. "Alex, I want you to know that your mother and I support whatever approach you want to take going forward. If you want to be more open about our family background, that's fine. If you prefer to keep it private, we respect that too." "I think the choice has been made for me at this point," Alex said with a slight smile. "But honestly, I'm okay with that. Hiding it was more stressful than I realized." 3 weeks later, Alex was surprised to receive a request to meet with Tyler at a neutral location off campus. Tyler's message was brief but sincere. "I owe you an apology and I'd like to give it in person if you're willing." Alex agreed to meet at the same cafe where he had had lunch with his father. When Tyler arrived, Alex was struck by how different he looked. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by what appeared to be genuine humility. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Tyler began. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Alex replied honestly. Tyler nodded. "I wouldn't have blamed you. Alex, I want to apologize for everything, not just because of who your father is, but because what I did was wrong regardless of your family background." "What changed your mind?" Alex asked. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "A lot of things. My father's reaction was a wake-up call. But mainly, I had to confront the fact that I was bullying someone who had never done anything to me, just because I thought I could get away with it. And because you thought I was poor," Alex added. "Yeah," Tyler admitted, his face reddening. "That's the part I'm most ashamed of. I realized that I've been judging people my entire life based on superficial things like clothes and possessions, and that's not who I want to be." They talked for over an hour. Tyler didn't make excuses for his behavior, and Alex didn't offer easy forgiveness. But by the end of their conversation, both young men had gained something valuable from the experience. "I'm not asking us to be friends," Tyler said as they prepared to leave. "I know I destroyed any possibility of that. But I hope someday you'll be able to think of me as someone who learned from his mistakes rather than just as the guy who made your life miserable." "I think that's possible," Alex replied. The incident had lasting effects throughout the university community. Dean Patterson implemented new programs focused on preventing harassment and promoting inclusivity. The donor gala the following year featured a presentation about creating a campus culture where all students feel valued regardless of their economic background. Alex threw himself into his studies with renewed energy, no longer worried about hiding his enthusiasm for learning or his family's support for his education. He also became involved in mentoring programs for first-generation college students, sharing his experience and advocating for policies that protected vulnerable students from harassment. Robert Chen, meanwhile, expanded his family's charitable giving to include specific programs addressing economic inequality in higher education. He established scholarship programs not just at Riverside University, but at several other institutions, always with the requirement that recipients be protected from discrimination based on their economic status. 6 months after the donor gala incident, Alex received an unexpected email from Tyler. It was brief but meaningful. "I saw the article about your renewable energy research in the university magazine. Congratulations. You're going to change the world someday." Alex smiled as he read the message. It wasn't friendship, and it didn't erase the harm that had been done. But it was evidence that people could change, that mistakes could lead to growth, and that even the most difficult situations could ultimately result in positive outcomes. As he closed his laptop and prepared for his advanced materials science class, Alex reflected on how much his life had changed since that first morning in the cafeteria. He was still the same person, still passionate about engineering, still determined to succeed on his own merits, still committed to making a positive impact on the world. But now he carried himself with a confidence that came not from hiding who he was, but from embracing all aspects of his identity. The harassment that had seemed so devastating at the time had ultimately led to positive changes not just for Alex, but for the entire university community. Sometimes, he thought, the most difficult challenges create the greatest opportunities for growth.